It was on a Tuesday morning in the ICU of St. Mary's Regional Hospital that I knelt for the first time before the image I had attacked from the pulpit for 23 years. My son, 7-year-old Luke, lay unconscious for 15 days, and I was talking to Our Lady of Guadalupe, asking for forgiveness. Yes, Pastor Elijah Miller, the man who dedicated half his life to fighting what he called Catholic idolatry, was there on my knees weeping before the saint I most hated in my life. And do you know what happened next? Luke opened his eyes. Not an hour later, not the next day. Right then at that moment, as if she had simply whispered in his ear, "Wake up, my son." Let me start at the beginning, because this story needs to be told in its entirety. You need to understand who I was to grasp the magnitude of the miracle that happened in my life. I was born in rural Goiás, in a family of pastors. My grandfather was a pastor, my father was a pastor, and from a young age I knew this would be my destiny too. I grew up hearing that Catholics weren't going to heaven, that the veneration of saints was the work of the devil, and that the Virgin Mary, well, that she was nothing more than a common woman who had the privilege of giving birth to Jesus. At 22, I had my own church, the True Salvation Christian Assembly, downtown Goiânia. We started with 30 members in a rented room, but in 5 years we were 400. I preached with fire, with conviction. People came from far and wide to hear me. I had the gift of gab, as they said, but I also had hatred in my heart, though I didn't see it. My favorite sermons were against Catholicism. I studied, I prepared, I memorized Bible verses to prove how wrong they were, and Our Lady of Guadalupe, she was my main target. Look, I'd say from the pulpit, they worship a black statue, an image made by human hands. This is pure idolatry. The congregation would applaud, shout hallelujah, and I felt like a warrior of God. How blind I was. I met Anna at an evangelical conference in Brasilia. She was a missionary, also the daughter of pastors, with the same strict upbringing as me. We married in 2 years, and our union was seen as an example in the community. We were the perfect pastor couple. She led the women's ministry, I preached, and together we were implacable against any form of religiosity we considered false. Luke was born 3 years after the wedding, a clever, cheerful boy, full of life. From a young age he went to services, participated in Sunday school, sang in the children's choir. He was our joy, our treasure. I dreamed of seeing him following in my footsteps one day, perhaps pastoring a church even bigger than mine. Life was good, you know. I was at the height of my ministry. I had a program on the local radio, was invited to conferences, people respected me. My church grew every month. I felt blessed, chosen by God, but there's something I learned. Sometimes God allows our lives to seem perfect just before showing us how much we truly need Him. It was a Thursday in October 2018. Luke was in a school presentation. They were going to perform the history of Brazil. He was playing the role of an indigenous person. He was so excited about the costume Anna had made. Suddenly, in the middle of the performance, he simply collapsed. Just like that, out of nowhere. A healthy child, with no health problems, fell to the ground and didn't wake up again. We rushed to the hospital. The doctors ran every possible test, CT scan, MRI, blood tests, electrocardiogram, electroencephalogram. Nothing, absolutely nothing explained what had happened. Luke was in a deep coma, but all his organs were functioning perfectly. Normal breathing, strong heart, stable blood pressure. It was as if he had simply fallen asleep. The first few days, I still kept the faith. I prayed incessantly, fasted, anointed Luke with holy oil, as the Bible teaches. I brought the whole church to pray at the hospital. We held vigils, cried out, campaigned. I was sure God would heal my son. After all, I was a faithful servant, a preacher of the truth. Why would God allow this to happen to me? But the days went by, and Luke didn't react. A week, 2 weeks, the doctors started talking about persistent vegetative state, words I refused to accept. Anna was devastated, cried day and night. The church continued to pray, but I noticed that some people started to whisper, to question, why doesn't God heal the pastor's own son? It was in the second week that I started to despair for real. You know that feeling when you realize you have no control over anything, that all your faith, all your conviction, All your religious authority mean nothing in the face of a situation you can't solve. That's what I felt. It was as if the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. I stopped preaching. I asked the elders to take over the church temporarily. My only occupation was to stay by Luke's bedside, holding his hand, talking as if he could hear me. I told stories, sang songs he liked, read Bible verses, but nothing. He remained there, breathing, but absent. It was one morning in the third week that everything changed. It was 2:30 in the morning. I had been at the hospital for 18 hours straight. Anna had gone home to shower and rest a little. I was alone with Luke, looking at him, feeling an anguish in my chest that seemed to suffocate me. Suddenly, a nurse came in and said I needed to step out for a bit, that they were going to do some procedures. I left the room without knowing where to go. The hospital was silent, only the sound of the machines and the footsteps of the night shift staff. I walked the corridors like a zombie, trying to process everything that was happening. That's when I passed in front of the hospital chapel. I'd never been in there before. I knew it was an ecumenical space, but since most of the patients were Catholic, it was full of Catholic symbols. There was a small image of Jesus crucified, some candles, and on the main altar, Our Lady of Guadalupe, the same image I attacked in my sermons, the same Catholic idolatry, I claimed, was the work of the devil. I don't know what came over me, but I went in. Maybe it was desperation, maybe it was loneliness, maybe it was God himself pushing me. I sat in the back pew and stared at the image. And you know what I thought? I thought about all the sermons I had preached against that figure. I remembered the harsh words I used, the contempt I felt, and for the first time I wondered, what if I'm wrong? That's when Anna appeared. She had returned to the hospital and searched everywhere for me. When she found me in the chapel, she didn't say anything. She just sat down beside me, and I noticed she was holding a rosary. A rosary. My wife, raised in the same doctrine as me, educated to reject any Catholic symbol, was there with a rosary. Where did you get that? I asked softly. A lady gave it to me this afternoon, she replied, without looking at me. She said Our Lady helps mothers in distress. I should have been enraged. I should have snatched that rosary from her hand and thrown it in the trash. I should have said a prayer rebuking the spirits of idolatry, but I didn't do any of that. I just asked, and do you believe? Anna looked at me with tear-filled eyes and said, Elijah, our son is dying. I don't care about doctrine anymore. I don't care about denomination. I don't care about anything. If there's someone in heaven who can help, I want that person to help us. We sat in silence for a few minutes. It was a heavy silence, full of pain, but also full of expectation. Then Anna got up, went to the altar, knelt before the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and began to pray softly. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw her nodding her head, crying, pleading. And me? I sat there, watching my wife do exactly what I had condemned for years. And instead of feeling anger, I felt envy. Envy of her simplicity, her humility, her ability to put her love for our son above any doctrinal prejudice. If you're following this channel, you know that stories like this are no coincidence. They are divine encounters that God allows to break our hardened hearts and show us truths that our arrogance prevents us from seeing. Subscribe to this channel to continue receiving stories like this, real testimonies of how God acts in ways our limited minds cannot comprehend. We left the chapel in silence and returned to Luke's room. He remained the same, connected to the machines, breathing with assistance. But something had changed in me. I could no longer look at him without thinking about the conversation we had in the chapel, without thinking about the image of Our Lady, without thinking about the possibility that my war against Catholicism was perhaps just pride disguised as religious zeal. Another week passed. Luke was now 22 days into his coma. The doctors started talking about difficult decisions, about quality of life, about realities I didn't want to accept. That's when Dr. Henry, the neurologist, called us for a serious conversation. Look, Pastor Elijah, he said, I need to be honest with you. We've run every possible test, consulted specialists in the city, even sent material for analysis in the United States. We haven't found any medical cause for Luke's condition. It's as if his brain simply decided to shut down. I asked if there was any hope for improvement. Dr. Henry sighed and replied, medically speaking, after 22 days in a deep coma, without an apparent cause, the chances of a full recovery are very slim. I'm not taking away your hope, but you need to be prepared for the possibility that Luke may need special care for the rest of his life. I left that conversation devastated. 22 days of praying, fasting, crying out to God, and this was the answer? Where was the God I preached about? Where was the power of prayer that I taught? Where were the miracles I promised the faithful? That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the hospital corridors until the early hours. It was a Thursday, I remember perfectly, 3 in the morning. The hospital was even quieter than usual. I passed by the chapel and saw that it was empty. I went in again, I don't know why. This time, I didn't sit in the back. I went straight to the altar, stood before the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and started to speak, not to pray, to speak, as if she were a real person there in front of me. Look, I said, I know I spent my whole life speaking ill of you. I know I called you an idol, a deception, worse things. I know I taught hundreds of people to reject you. If you really exist, if you can hear me, then forgive me. I was wrong. I paused, looked at the image, and continued. I'm not asking to convert to Catholicism. I'm not promising that I'll change religions or stop being an evangelical. I'm just asking as a father, as a desperate man who doesn't know what to do anymore. If you have power, if you have influence up there in heaven, intercede for my son. He is innocent. He never spoke ill of you. If someone has to pay for my mistakes, let it be me, not him. I cried like I hadn't cried since I was a child. You know that kind of cry that comes from the depths of your soul? The one that feels like it's going to empty everything inside you. That's how I cried before that image, and for the first time, in 22 days, I felt a strange peace. Not a certainty that everything would be all right, but a peace that I had given it all into the hands of the one who could truly solve it. I went back to Luke's room. It was almost 4 in the morning. Anna was asleep in the armchair beside the bed. I sat in the other chair, took my son's hand, and started to talk to him softly, as I did every night. Luke, my son, I said. Daddy did something he never thought he'd do. Daddy asked Our Lady of Guadalupe for help. Yes, the one Daddy always spoke badly of. But do you know what I discovered? I discovered that a father's love has no religion, no doctrine, no prejudice. When your child is suffering, you ask for help from anyone who can help. I continued talking to him for another hour until sleep overcame me. I slept right there, holding his hand. It was the first peaceful sleep I'd had in over 3 weeks. I woke up to Anna calling me. It was 6:30 in the morning. The sun was beginning to peek through the bedroom window. Elijah, wake up, she said. Look here. I opened my eyes, and the first thing I saw was Anna pointing to Luke's bed. I looked, and he was looking at me. His eyes were open, focused on me. Dad, he said softly, his voice hoarse from not speaking for so long. I stood up so quickly that I knocked over the chair. Luke, my son, you're awake. Anna started to cry and pressed the nurse call button. In 2 minutes, the room was full of doctors and nurses. Dr. Henry rushed in, still in his pajamas, because he lived near the hospital. It was quite a commotion. Luke was awake, conscious, and responding to simple questions. He remembered his name, knew who we were, and recognized the school where he had collapsed. The doctors couldn't explain it. It's impossible, Dr. Henry repeated. 22 days in a deep coma, and he wakes up like this, out of nowhere without any apparent sequelae. They ran new tests, all normal. The MRI showed perfect brain activity. Neurological exams detected no impairment. It was as if Luke had simply paused life and decided to return. But what struck me most was what he said when we were finally alone in the room. Anna had gone out to call relatives, and I was there, still unable to believe my son was back. Dad, he said, pulling me close, I saw her. Saw who, my son? The lady in blue. She came to talk to me. My heart pounded. What do you mean, Luke? What lady in blue? A very beautiful lady, with a blue dress and a shiny crown. She said you were very sad, that you needed to stop being angry with her, and that Jesus loves her very much. Can you imagine what I felt at that moment? My 7-year-old son, who had been raised in a strict evangelical church, who had never had contact with Catholic images, describing Our Lady of Guadalupe exactly, and saying that Jesus loved her. What else did she say, my son? That it was time for me to wake up, that mommy and daddy needed me, and that you didn't need to be afraid of her anymore. That she just wanted to help our family. I left the room, and went straight to the chapel. I needed to process what was happening. I found the same image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, the same one I had begged for help a few hours earlier. But now she seemed different. She wasn't just a statue to me anymore. She was a real presence, someone who had interceded for my son. I knelt before her and said, "Thank you. I don't know how you did it. I don't know why you helped a man who spent his life attacking you, but thank you. I promise I'll never speak ill of you again. I promise I'll tell everyone what you did for my family." Luke stayed another week in the hospital for observation, but he was completely healed. The doctors called it a miraculous recovery, an inexplicable phenomenon, a case study, but I knew exactly what had happened. Our Lady of Guadalupe had interceded for my son with Jesus. News of Luke's cure spread quickly through the city. After all, the famous pastor's son had been in a coma for 22 days and woken up out of nowhere. People came to congratulate me, saying it was proof of God's power, that my faith had been rewarded. But I knew it wasn't my faith. It was the mercy of a heavenly mother, whom I had despised for over 20 years. I returned to preach the following Sunday. The church was packed. Everyone wanted to hear the testimony of the pastor whose son had been miraculously cured. I went up to the pulpit, looked at the congregation, and for the first time in 23 years of ministry, I didn't know what to say. I started by talking about Luke's coma, about the despair, about the unanswered prayers. The church was completely silent. Then came the hard part. "Brothers and sisters," I said, "I need to confess something to you. For 23 years of ministry, I attacked Catholicism. I called Catholics idolaters, said that the veneration of saints was the work of the devil, claimed that Our Lady of Guadalupe was nothing more than a powerless statue. But on the morning my son was healed, I was in the hospital chapel, kneeling before the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, asking for forgiveness and begging for help." A murmur ran through the church. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I continued, "And you know what happened? She interceded for my son. Luke woke up and said he'd seen a young woman in blue, who told him Jesus loved her very much. Brothers and sisters, I was wrong. I spent over 20 years fighting against a heavenly mother, who only wanted to help people." A deafening silence filled the church. I noticed some people were shocked, others angry, some crying. I ended the sermon by saying I needed to rethink many things I had taught, that perhaps it was time to replace hatred with humility. That was my last sermon at that church. In the following days, half the congregation sought me out for explanations, questioning if I was straying from the faith. The church board scheduled a meeting, and very politely suggested I take a leave of absence to restore myself spiritually. I didn't resist. I understood my time as pastor of that denomination was over. Anna fully supported me. She was also undergoing a profound spiritual transformation. We began to question many doctrines we had blindly followed, many prejudices we had harbored in the name of the true faith. That's when we started attending the National Shrine of Guadalupe, not to convert to Catholicism, but to get to know better the one who had saved our son. The first time I entered the shrine was overwhelming. Thousands of people, from all walks of life, of all ages, united in a simple and genuine faith. I attended a mass, something I had never done in my life. I watched people praying the rosary, lighting candles, leaving ex votos, and you know what I realized? I saw the same faith I preached, the same devotion to Jesus, the same love for God. The difference was that there, Jesus had a present mother, an intercessor, who cared for his children with maternal tenderness. I talked to Father Anthony, a very wise Portuguese priest who worked at the shrine. I told him my story, talked about my prejudices, about Luke's healing, about my crisis of faith. He listened patiently, and at the end said something I never forgot. My son, God doesn't have a religion. God has love. Our Lady of Guadalupe didn't heal your son for you to convert to Catholicism. She healed because she is a mother, and a mother doesn't choose which child to help based on their religion. She simply loves and intercedes. Those words freed me from a guilt I didn't even know I carried. I didn't need to become Catholic to honor Our Lady. I just needed to acknowledge that I had been wrong, ask for forgiveness, and live more humbly and lovingly. Luke grew up healthy and happy. Today he's 15, a normal teenager, plays soccer, studies well, is dating the neighbor's daughter. But he never forgot the young woman in blue who spoke to him during his coma. Sometimes he draws her, always with a blue mantle and a sweet expression on her face. I stopped pastoring denominations, but I didn't stop preaching. Today I travel the country giving testimonies in evangelical and Catholic churches, telling my story, talking about humility, about love instead of hatred, about unity instead of division among Christians. I'm not always well received. Many evangelicals consider me a deviant, a traitor to the Protestant cause. Some Catholics distrust my sincerity, thinking it's a strategy to convert Catholics to evangelicalism. But most people understand the message. God is greater than our denominations, love is stronger than prejudice, and sometimes the person you most reject is exactly the one God uses to bless you. Anna and I are still evangelicals. We attend a small and welcoming church where I can share my journey without judgment, but we also go to the shrine of Guadalupe at least once a year to bring flowers to Our Lady, light a candle, and thank her for our son's life. Last October 12th, the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, I took Luke to the shrine. It's become our tradition. We stood in the crowd, attended Mass, prayed the rosary with thousands of people. At the end, Luke asked me to get closer to the image. We went there, in the midst of so many people, and Luke stared at the image of Our Lady. Then he looked at me and said, "Dad, she's still the same. She still has the same sweet smile she had when she talked to me in the hospital." At that moment, I understood that the miracle wasn't just Luke waking up from his coma. The miracle was my heart of stone transforming into a heart of flesh. The miracle was discovering that God's love is much greater than my prejudices. The miracle was learning that a heavenly mother can love even a son who spent years speaking ill of her. Today, when someone asks me if I'm Catholic or evangelical, I reply, I'm a Christian. I'm a child of God who was taught by Our Lady of Guadalupe to love instead of hate, to unite instead of divide, to humble myself instead of exalting myself. My life changed completely after that early morning in the hospital chapel. I lost many friends from my pastor days. I lost religious prestige. I lost the financial security that the ministry gave me, but I gained something much more valuable. I gained peace in my heart. I gained the certainty that God loves me even when I'm wrong. I gained a heavenly family that includes not only Jesus as Savior, but also Mary as an intercessory mother. If you're watching this video and have prejudices against other Christian denominations, I ask you, don't make the same mistakes I made. Don't waste your energy fighting brothers and sisters in faith. Use that energy to love, to serve, to help those in need. God doesn't rejoice when His children fight among themselves. And if you're Catholic and have suffered attacks from evangelicals, don't hold resentment in your heart. Pray for them,
as Our Lady surely prayed for me during all those years I attacked her. Love always conquers hate. Patience always conquers aggression. Our Lady of Guadalupe taught me that being a mother means loving unconditionally, forgiving infinitely, and interceding constantly. She didn't wait for me to ask for forgiveness before she started praying for my son. She didn't demand I change my religion to help me. She simply loved, as any true mother does. Today, when I preach about religious tolerance, about unity among Christians, about humility and faith, I always tell this story, not to convert anyone to Catholicism, not to diminish other denominations, but to show that God uses whomever He wants, however He wants, whenever He wants to touch our hardened hearts. Luke is here with me today, a healthy young man full of dreams. He doesn't remember anything from the time he was in a coma, but he remembers perfectly the conversation he had with Our Lady of Guadalupe, and whenever someone questions whether it really happened, he responds with the simplicity of someone who lived a miracle. Of course it happened. Why would she lie to me? This is my story, the story of a proud pastor who was broken by the love of a heavenly mother. The story of a family that almost destroyed itself and was restored by the intercession of someone I least expected. The story of a man who learned that sometimes God uses exactly what we reject to save us. Our Lady of Guadalupe didn't just heal my son, she healed my soul. She transformed my hatred into love, my prejudice into acceptance, my arrogance into humility, and for that reason, as long as I live, I will tell this story to anyone who wants to hear it, because there are miracles that happen, not to convert us to a specific religion, but to convert us to love, and that was the greatest miracle of my life.